Welcome back to today's audiobook summary. Imagine for a moment that every goal you've ever dreamed of achieving, whether it's building unstoppable self-confidence, creating financial freedom, transforming your career into something truly extraordinary, or even cultivating richer, more meaningful relationships, wasn't really dependent on luck, talent, or circumstance, but on one timeless force that every single person has access to. A force that has quietly shaped the lives of the most successful people in history: self-discipline. In this audiobook summary of the power of discipline, we will uncover not just the theory, but the practical systems, daily routines, and mindset shifts that allow ordinary people to experience extraordinary transformation. And you will discover why this one character trait, more than any other, determines whether your life is guided by growth, passion, and purpose, or by distraction, excuses, and missed opportunities. Discipline, when understood deeply, is not about punishment or restriction. It is about responsibility, about reclaiming control over your habits, your choices, your emotions, and your future. You will learn how repetition, persistence, and consistency create the architecture of success, how small daily actions compound over time into radical change, and how the art of delayed gratification, choosing long-term results over short-term comfort, becomes the most powerful investment you can ever make in yourself. We will talk about mental toughness, how to train your brain for resilience, how to lean into discomfort, face fear, and even use practices like rejection therapy as a tool for growth, building the inner strength that allows you to endure when others quit, to persist when others fold, and to rise when others retreat. This book promises to reveal the subtle yet transformative discipline hacks that rewire your identity and shift your belief systems, moving you from someone who struggles with willpower into someone who thrives through carefully designed systems and processes. Someone who relies not on bursts of motivation, but on a foundation of routines, habits, and rituals, like the power of a structured morning routine that set the tone for productivity, clarity, and purpose throughout the entire day. You will learn how to harness brain training techniques and mindfulness practices to sharpen focus, stay rooted in the present moment, and cultivate a sense of calm, inner peace, and balance that not only sustains success, but makes the journey itself deeply fulfilling. And here's the big promise. By mastering self-discipline, you won't just see improvements in one area of life. You will see a ripple effect across every domain: your finances, your career, your health, your relationships, your emotional well-being. Through mindset reframing, through learning to see discomfort not as a threat, but as a teacher, through applying principles like the 80-20 rule to maximize efficiency, through practicing the art of rest, recovery, and sustainability, you will unlock a level of productivity and clarity that feels almost limitless. Self-discipline becomes the hidden engine that drives not only short-term wins, but long-term legacy, helping you create a self-image aligned with your deepest values, giving you the endurance and persistence to continue when others stop, and the serenity of knowing that every day you are moving with purpose, with focus, with direction. In this journey, you'll discover that discipline is not the enemy of freedom, but its foundation. It gives you the power to shape your identity, to design a life of balance and growth, to reframe challenges into opportunities, and to create success that lasts because it is built on strong character and tested habits. This is not about chasing motivation or waiting for passion to arrive. It is about daily action, about aligning your behaviors with your vision, about doing the work with patience and trust in the process. While you take in these words, allow yourself to imagine the version of you who has mastered self-discipline. Calmer, more focused, more productive, living with intention, free from the chains of procrastination, equipped with the mindset and tools to pursue your greatest ambitions with clarity and courage. That version of you is not a fantasy. It is the inevitable result of practicing the principles in the power of discipline. This audiobook will be your guide to unlocking that transformation step by step, habit by habit, choice by choice, until you look back and realize that discipline was not just a practice, but the greatest gift you could ever give yourself. Chapter 1. Self-discipline. The biological argument. When we hear the word self-discipline, many of us instinctively think of sheer willpower, of forcing ourselves to do something difficult when every fiber of our being resists. But in this audiobook summary of The Power of Discipline, the chapter Self-Discipline, the biological argument invites us to look deeper, beyond the surface, into the very design of the human brain and body, showing us that discipline is not simply a matter of personal choice or moral strength, but something rooted in biology, in the wiring of our nervous system, in the way evolution shaped us to pursue immediate rewards, and in the way modern life constantly challenges that ancient programming. The big promise of this chapter, as you'll hear in this audiobook, is that once you understand the biological argument, once you recognize why you crave instant gratification, why resisting temptation feels so exhausting, and why bad habits are easier to form than good ones, you will no longer see self-discipline as a mysterious talent some people are born with and others are not, but as a trainable skill, a function of your brain that can be strengthened, shaped, and mastered through deliberate practice. The chapter begins by explaining how our brains evolved for survival in environments where food was scarce, threats were constant, and opportunities had to be seized immediately. Our ancestors were not rewarded for patience. They were rewarded for speed, for responding to danger, for eating when food was available, for conserving energy whenever possible. This wiring, which once ensured survival, now works against us in a modern world of endless calories, unlimited digital distractions, and constant opportunities for passive comfort. The biological pull toward immediate satisfaction is still present, but now it sabotages long-term goals. That is why delayed gratification feels unnatural. It runs counter to the default programming of the human brain. Understanding this, in this audiobook book summary, is the first step in reclaiming control. The chapter then dives into the role of the brain's two key systems: the limbic system, which drives emotion, impulse, and craving, and the prefrontal cortex, the seat of reasoning, planning, and self-control. When you reach for junk food, procrastinate on a project, or choose Netflix over the gym, it is the limbic system overriding your higher brain. But when you resist, when you pause, reflect, and act in line with your long-term values, it is the prefrontal cortex exerting control. The biological argument, as explored in this audiobook summary, is simple yet powerful. Discipline is not about denying yourself pleasure. It is about training the prefrontal cortex to lead rather than allowing the limbic system to dominate. Here, the book makes another big promise. If you can train your brain to strengthen the prefrontal cortex through small daily practices, you can rewire your default responses, making discipline not just possible, but increasingly automatic. Self-discipline, then, is not about superhuman strength. It is about consistent brain training, about repetition, about creating habits and routines that shift the balance of power in your favor. This audiobook emphasizes that even tiny, repeated actions compound over time into radical personal transformation. The chapter also touches on the concept of ego depletion, the idea that willpower functions like a muscle that tires with overuse. This explains why it is harder to make disciplined choices at the end of the day, why decision fatigue leads us to snap, binge, or give up on commitments. The solution, the audiobook teaches, is to build systems that reduce the need for constant decision-making. Structures like morning routines, pre-planned meals, or scheduled work times, so that you conserve mental energy for the choices that matter most. Discipline, biologically speaking, becomes less about resisting temptation over and over, and more about designing your life so that temptation shows up less frequently and willpower is required less often. Another fascinating promise of this chapter, as highlighted in this audiobook book summary, is that self-discipline can literally reshape your brain. Studies in neuroscience have shown that meditation, mindfulness, and intentional focus can strengthen neural pathways in the prefrontal cortex, increasing the brain's ability to regulate emotion, resist distraction, and maintain calm under pressure. This means practices like mindfulness, meditation, and even deep breathing are not soft skills. They are biological training exercises for the disciplined muscle. Every time you focus on the present moment instead of being pulled into impulse, you are engaging in brain training, gradually building resilience, patience, and control. The chapter doesn't shy away from discussing the discomfort of this training. It explains that the brain naturally resists change. that the discomfort of resisting temptation or pushing yourself into a new habit is the biological equivalent of muscle soreness after a workout. Just as physical muscles grow through stress and recovery, your discipline grows through repeated exposure to challenge and discomfort. In fact, the audiobook promises that if you can reframe discomfort as evidence of growth, if you can learn to embrace rather than avoid it, you will accelerate your transformation and build the kind of mental toughness that sets high achievers apart from everyone else. Ultimately, the biological argument of discipline, as this audiobook summary makes clear, boils down to a liberating truth. There is nothing wrong with you if you struggle with procrastination, cravings, or inconsistency. You are not broken. You are human, and your biology is doing what it was designed to do. But by applying systems, processes, and routines, by training your prefrontal cortex, and by practicing small daily acts of control, you can align your biology with your goals instead of fighting against it. The promise of this chapter in this audiobook is radical. Discipline is not a mystery, not a matter of luck or personality, but a science. A skill rooted in biology that anyone can learn, strengthen, and master for long success. Your brain can be reshaped, your habits can be restructured, and your life can be transformed not through willpower alone, but through the conscious training of your most powerful biological tool. Once you understand this, you will never look at self-discipline the same way again, because you will see it not as a struggle, but as a practice, a process, and a path to becoming the best version of yourself. In this audiobook, book summary of The Power of Discipline, the chapter, The Benefits of Self-Discipline, takes us on a deep exploration of why self-discipline is the single most powerful factor in achieving lasting success, personal growth, and true fulfillment. The big promise of this chapter is compelling. By mastering self-discipline, you are not simply improving your ability to resist temptation or complete tasks, but you are fundamentally transforming your identity, your mindset, your habits, and ultimately your life trajectory, creating the conditions for growth in every domain: finances, career, relationships, health, and personal development. This audiobook explains in precise, practical, and scientifically supported ways why disciplined individuals are consistently more successful, more confident, and more capable of turning long-term goals into reality. And it shows listeners that these benefits are not the result of luck or talent, but of consistent, intentional action, systems, and processes. The chapter begins by emphasizing the first and most obvious benefit of self-discipline: the ability to control your impulses and delay gratification. In this audiobook, you will learn why people who consistently practice self-discipline are able to resist the lure of instant pleasure and instead invest their energy into activities that deliver long-term rewards. This is more than just a theoretical concept. It is a cornerstone of all meaningful success journeys. When you can consistently prioritize important tasks over fleeting distractions, when you can endure discomfort, boredom, or fear, you build the kind of mental toughness that allows you to pursue goals that others abandon, no matter how attractive or tempting the easier path may appear. Another key promise explored in this chapter is the profound impact of self on your productivity habits and routines. The audiobook explains how disciplined individuals leverage systems and processes to make consistency almost automatic daily actions, whether it's following a structured morning routine, executing a deliberate work schedule, or engaging in positive habits, compound over time to create radical transformation. The book's summary highlights that self-discipline is not about acting on willpower alone, which is finite, but about designing your environment, behaviors, and habits so that your discipline multiplies naturally, producing exponential results with less conscious struggle. The chapter also explores how self-discipline strengthens your self-confidence and personal responsibility. This audiobook book emphasizes that when you follow through on commitments to yourself, when you act in alignment with your values and long-term goals, you develop a strong sense of identity and self-image. You stop blaming external circumstances or other people for your outcomes because you understand that your success is a direct result of your choices, persistence, and mindset. In practical terms, this means your career, finances, and relationships all improve because you bring reliability, focus, and integrity into every area of life. The promise here is profound. Mastering self-discipline leads to mastery of your life. Another major benefit highlighted in this audiobook is the relationship between self-discipline and emotional resilience. Disciplined people are better equipped to navigate fear, rejection, disappointment, and stress because they have trained their minds to tolerate discomfort and to persist through adversity. Techniques like reframing challenges, endurance exercises, and delayed gratification are not just abstract principles. They are proven methods to rewire your brain for resilience. The book summary explains that by repeatedly choosing disciplined action over impulse, you develop a calm, focused mindset, creating the mental toughness required to thrive under pressure, remain consistent during setbacks, and stay motivated over the long term. In addition to personal and emotional benefits, the audiobook details the tangible advantages self provides in health, productivity, and financial outcomes. Individuals with strong self-discipline tend to follow structured routines, exercise consistently, and maintain healthy diets, producing not only improved physical well-being, but also increased energy and focus. Professionally, they are more productive because they can prioritize high-impact activities, apply the 80-20 rule, and systematically work toward meaningful results. Financially, self-disciplined individuals delay unnecessary spending, invest wisely, and plan strategically for long-term growth. This chapter promises that these benefits compound over time, creating a life of stability, freedom, and measurable success across multiple domains. Perhaps most importantly, the audiobook book summary emphasizes that self-discipline is a skill, not a fixed trait. The chapter encourages listeners to view discipline as a trainable aspect of identity. Through repeated, intentional practice, by embracing discomfort, failure, and challenge as essential steps in growth, listeners can strengthen their willpower, reinforce positive habits, and shift their belief systems to align with their highest ambitions. By the end of this chapter, the promise is clear. Discipline is not merely about control, it is the ultimate lever for radical, long-term transformation in life. Finally, the chapter closes by tying all of these benefits together into a single, cohesive insight. Self-discipline amplifies every other quality you cultivate. When paired with focus, persistence, systems, and mindset, discipline enables the creation of extraordinary results that are sustainable, balanced, and deeply fulfilling. This audiobook book summary leaves you with the clear message that the journey to self-discipline is not easy, but it is the most reliable path to personal freedom, confidence, and lifelong success. In this audiobook book summary of The Power of Discipline, the chapter Daily Habits to Improve Self-Discipline offers one of the most practical, actionable, and transformative sections of the book, promising listeners that by adopting the right daily routine and habits, they can train their minds, strengthen their willpower, and create a consistent trajectory toward long-term success, growth, and personal mastery. The big promise of this chapter is profound. While self-discipline can sometimes feel like a mysterious trait possessed only by the highly motivated, it is, in fact, a skill that can be cultivated intentionally through specific daily actions. And the habits shared in this audiobook book are the exact behaviors that consistently distinguish high achievers from the rest, allowing them to maintain focus, build mental toughness, and produce extraordinary results across every area of life: finances, career, relationships, health, and personal development. The chapter begins by emphasizing the central role of morning routines as a cornerstone habit for self-discipline. The audiobook explains that the way you start your day sets the tone for every decision, every action, and every habit that follows. By engaging in deliberate, structured morning activities such as exercise, meditation, journaling, or reviewing your daily priorities, you signal to your brain that focus, responsibility, and intentional action are the default state. This chapter makes a powerful promise. By consistently following a morning routine, even for a few weeks, your mind and body begin to crave structure. Your willpower reserves are strengthened, and small decisions that would normally drain your mental energy become automatic, freeing up mental space to tackle the tasks that truly matter for long-term transformation. Next, the audiobook book summary delves into the concept of habit stacking, a technique that allows you to attach new, productive behaviors to existing routines. For example, combining a short gratitude practice with your morning coffee or a 5-minute meditation after brushing your teeth creates neural associations that make positive habits easier to maintain. The chapter emphasizes that repetition and consistency are key biological principles. Every time you perform a disciplined action, you strengthen the neural pathways associated with self in the prefrontal cortex, and over time, these behaviors become automatic. The promise here is that with consistent daily habits, you no longer rely on fluctuating motivation or sheer willpower. Instead, you build a resilient framework that allows self-discipline to operate almost effortlessly in the background. Another crucial focus of the chapter is the role of planning and prioritization. The audiobook explains that self-discipline is not merely about action, but about directing your energy strategically. By planning your day, breaking tasks into manageable steps, and identifying the most impactful actions, sometimes applying the 80-20 rule, you maximize efficiency and minimize decision fatigue. The chapter promises that this small but consistent practice of prioritizing high-value tasks ensures that your efforts produce compounding, long-term results, and it allows you to maintain focus and control even in high-pressure situations or during periods of stress. The chapter also addresses the importance of tracking and reflection. In this audiobook book, you learn that self-discipline is not static. It improves through feedback and conscious adjustment. Daily journaling, progress tracking, or reviewing accomplishments and setbacks allows you to identify patterns, reinforce positive habits, and correct course when old, unproductive behaviors try to creep back in. The promise here is clear. By making reflection a daily habit, you cultivate a mindset of growth and continuous improvement, turning self-discipline into a measurable, actionable skill rather than an abstract concept. Furthermore, the audiobook emphasizes the power of environment design as a daily habit that supports self-discipline. By intentionally structuring your physical and digital spaces to reduce distractions, make productive actions easier, and limit exposure to temptation, you set yourself up for consistent success. Whether it's keeping your workspace tidy, organizing your schedule, or removing junk food from your kitchen, these small but strategic actions reduce the need for constant reliance on willpower, making disciplined behavior the default state. The chapter promises that by shaping your environment, you can maintain momentum and consistency without feeling constantly deprived or fatigued. Importantly, the audiobook book summary highlights health daily habits as integral to self-discipline. Exercise, sleep, hydration, and proper nutrition are not optional extras. They are biological prerequisites for focus, energy, and emotional control. The chapter explains that when your body is functioning optimally, your brain has the fuel and stamina to resist impulses, make better decisions, and persist through challenges. The promise is that integrating these foundational habits into your daily routine amplifies every other aspect of discipline, creating a positive feedback loop that accelerates transformation across personal and professional domains. Finally, the chapter concludes by emphasizing that the journey towards self-discipline is cumulative and identity-based. The audiobook explains that performing small, consistent actions every day reshapes not only your behavior, but also your self-image and your belief systems. By consciously choosing habits that align with the person you want to become, focused, responsible, resilient, and successful, you reinforce a positive identity that makes disciplined action increasingly natural. The chapter promises that over time, these daily habits transform into a lifestyle of intentionality, growth, and high performance, allowing you to experience long-term results that are sustainable, meaningful, and deeply fulfilling. In sum, this audiobook book chapter delivers a clear, actionable roadmap. Self-discipline is not about heroically resisting temptation once in a while. It is about creating a daily framework of small, repeatable habits that strengthen your brain, align your behavior with your goals, and gradually transform your identity. By implementing the routines, systems, and practices outlined in this book summary, you can cultivate resilience, mental toughness, productivity, and focus, creating the conditions for extraordinary success in every area of life while maintaining balance, calm, and clarity throughout your journey. The chapter Tips for Building Better Habits explores one of the most practical and transformative aspects of personal development, offering listeners actionable guidance on how to establish, maintain, and optimize habits that lead to long success, growth, and a stronger sense of personal responsibility. The big promise of this chapter is straightforward, yet profoundly empowering. By understanding the mechanisms behind habit formation and applying the right strategies, anyone can deliberately design their life, reshape their identity, and achieve results across every major domain: career, finances, relationships, health, and mental performance, without relying solely on fleeting motivation or bursts of willpower. This audiobook teaches that habits are the true architecture of self-discipline, and once you master them, consistency, focus, and productivity become natural outcomes rather than struggles. The chapter begins by emphasizing the biological and psychological foundation of habit formation. In this audiobook book, listeners are reminded that habits are essentially neural pathways in the brain, repeated actions that, through consistency, become automated. The more a behavior is repeated, the stronger the neural pathway becomes, making the action increasingly effortless. This principle explains why some behaviors, whether positive or negative, feel almost automatic. And the chapter promises that by consciously applying deliberate strategies, you can accelerate the formation of positive habits while weakening counterproductive ones. The book's summary underscores the empowering insight that habits are not destiny. They are trainable tools that shape your self-image, productivity, and long-term outcomes. A major focus of the chapter is the use of small, incremental actions as a cornerstone for habit formation. The audiobook explains that attempting massive change all at once often leads to burnout, frustration, or regression. Instead, the chapter teaches that habits should begin small, almost imperceptible, and grow gradually over time. This strategy reduces resistance, lowers the likelihood of failure, and allows your brain to integrate new behaviors naturally. The promise is clear. By starting with manageable steps, you build momentum, reinforce positive neural pathways, and make self-discipline sustainable, ensuring long-term results rather than temporary bursts of effort. Another critical insight emphasized in this audiobook book is the importance of habit stacking and environmental design. The chapter explains that linking a new habit to an existing one, such as performing a 2-minute meditation after brushing your teeth or reviewing priorities after your morning coffee, creates natural neural associations that increase adherence. Similarly, shaping your environment to support desired behaviors, removing distractions, organizing your workspace, or making healthy options more accessible reduces reliance on willpower and makes disciplined action almost automatic. The book summary promises that by leveraging these strategies, listeners can create systems that support consistent productivity, focus, and personal growth without exhausting mental energy or relying solely on fleeting motivation. The audiobook further explores the role of tracking and accountability in reinforcing habit formation. The chapter teaches that self-discipline is strengthened through awareness by monitoring progress, reflecting on successes and setbacks, and holding yourself accountable. You create feedback loops that reinforce commitment and resilience. This could include journaling, using habit tracking apps, or enlisting the support of peers or mentors. The promise here is transformative. When you consistently track your habits, you not only maintain progress, but also build confidence in your ability to control your behavior, reinforcing a positive self-image that supports further growth. Importantly, the chapter also addresses the psychological principle of reward and reinforcement. Habits are strengthened when they provide immediate positive feedback, even if the ultimate benefit is long-term. In this audiobook book, listeners are guided to design systems where small wins and progress are celebrated, creating dopamine-driven reinforcement that motivates continuation. By pairing habit building with meaningful rewards, the process becomes both enjoyable and sustainable, turning self-discipline from a struggle into a source of personal satisfaction and momentum. The chapter also discusses the importance of resilience and reframing failure. The audiobook explains that setbacks are inevitable, but they are not indicative of personal failure. Instead, they are part of the habit-building process. By reframing mistakes as learning opportunities, adjusting your strategies, and returning to the desired behavior immediately, you cultivate persistence, endurance, and mental toughness. The promise here is crucial. Through consistent practice and constructive reframing, even those with historically poor habits can achieve radical personal transformation over time. Finally, the audiobook book summary emphasizes the connection between habits and identity. The chapter argues that sustainable behavior change is not achieved by forcing action alone, but by internalizing habits as part of who you are. When you consistently perform disciplined actions, your self-image evolves. You begin to see yourself as a disciplined, productive, and responsible person. This shift in identity reinforces behavior, making positive habits, self-discipline, and personal responsibility automatic rather than imposed. The promise of this insight is profound. By aligning your habits with your desired identity, you transform not just what you do, but who you are, creating lasting growth across all areas of life. In conclusion, this audiobook book chapter provides a comprehensive roadmap for building better habits. It teaches that the key to self-discipline is not motivation alone, but deliberate, consistent action supported by systems, environmental design, habit stacking, rewards, tracking, and identity alignment. The chapter promises listeners that by integrating these tips into daily life, they can develop habits that enhance productivity, focus, resilience, and long-term success, turning discipline into a lifestyle and transformation into an inevitable result. The chapter Get Comfortable with Being Uncomfortable delves into one of the most transformative principles for building lasting self-discipline, mental toughness, and personal growth. Offering listeners a profound insight, the path to extraordinary results, lasting habits, and true freedom is rarely comfortable, and those who thrive in life are the ones willing to lean into discomfort, embrace challenge, and persist when most people quit. The big promise of this chapter is that by systematically practicing discomfort, you not only strengthen your willpower, resilience, and self, but you also expand your capacity to handle fear, uncertainty, and rejection, creating a foundation for extraordinary career success, financial growth, meaningful relationships, and personal fulfillment. This audiobook teaches that discomfort is not an obstacle to avoid, but a signal of growth, a critical lever for radical transformation that distinguishes high achievers from the rest. The chapter begins by addressing a fundamental truth that many people resist. Human beings are biologically wired to seek comfort and avoid pain, a survival mechanism that made sense in the evolutionary past, but now often works against us in modern life. In this audiobook book, listeners learn that our instinctive desire to avoid discomfort, whether through procrastination, distraction, or overconsumption of easy pleasures, prevents us from developing self-discipline, resilience, and long-term focus. The chapter makes a bold promise. Once you understand that discomfort is a natural and necessary part of growth, and once you learn to welcome it as a teacher rather than a threat, you can accelerate your transformation, turning challenges into opportunities and fear into fuel for action. A key insight emphasized in this audiobook book summary is the principle of gradual exposure to discomfort. The chapter explains that building tolerance for discomfort is like training a muscle. It requires repeated, deliberate practice. This can include physical discomfort, such as exercising beyond your comfort zone, or mental and emotional challenges, like tackling difficult conversations, embracing rejection, or confronting deeply ingrained fears. The promise here is profound. By intentionally putting yourself in situations that test your limits, you rewire your brain to tolerate uncertainty, resist impulses, and act in alignment with long goals, even when it feels difficult or uncomfortable. Over time, what once felt unbearable becomes manageable, and what once required extraordinary willpower becomes routine. The audiobook further explores discomfort as a catalyst for personal growth and character building. The chapter teaches that facing challenges and enduring temporary pain strengthens not only your mental fortitude, but also your identity, self-image, and self-confidence. Each time you take action despite fear or resistance, you reinforce the belief that you are capable, resilient, and in control of your life. The book's summary emphasizes that this is not about seeking suffering for its own sake, but about using discomfort strategically to expand your capacity, push past limiting beliefs, and cultivate the kind of discipline that produces sustainable results in career, finances, productivity, and relationships. Another powerful takeaway highlighted in this audiobook book is the connection between discomfort and delayed gratification. The chapter explains that the ability to resist short-term comfort for long-term gain is the hallmark of high achievers. By practicing discomfort deliberately, Whether through fasting, challenging workouts, or tackling difficult tasks first, you train your mind to prioritize long-term results over immediate pleasure. The promise is that this practice enhances your ability to make strategic decisions, maintain focus, and follow through on commitments, laying the groundwork for lasting success and mastery over impulses. The chapter also examines rejection therapy and fear exposure as tools to normalize discomfort. In this audiobook book, listeners are introduced to exercises designed to push the boundaries of social fear, uncertainty, and anxiety, teaching that repeated exposure reduces the emotional intensity of fear over time. This is not just theory. Scientific studies in psychology confirm that individuals who embrace controlled discomfort consistently develop higher resilience, better stress management, and more confidence in handling life's challenges. The chapter promises that by systematically practicing these exercises, you become less reactive, more persistent, and better equipped to pursue ambitious goals in the face of resistance, criticism, or setbacks. Chapters in Philosophy and Goal Attainment explores a profound intersection between ancient wisdom and modern productivity, teaching listeners that achieving meaningful goals is not solely about willpower, aggressive action, or relentless hustle, but about cultivating a mindset rooted in focus, presence, and intentionality. The big promise of this chapter is transformative by integrating the principles of Zen into daily life. You can approach goal attainment with clarity, calm, and consistency, dramatically enhancing self-discipline, mental resilience, productivity, and personal growth, while reducing stress, anxiety, and the paralyzing effects of overthinking or perfectionism. This audiobook shows that when you combine deliberate action with mindful awareness, you create a powerful synergy that allows long-term goals to be pursued with grace, balance, and sustainable energy, making success not just achievable but deeply fulfilling. The chapter begins by introducing the fundamental Zen concept of living in the present moment. In this audiobook book, listeners are reminded that much of human suffering and inefficiency arises from preoccupation with the past or worry about the future. When we obsess over outcomes or fear failure, our energy is scattered, our focus diminishes, and our ability to take consistent action is compromised. The book's summary emphasizes that Zen teaches the importance of anchoring attention in the present, allowing us to fully engage with each task, decision, and challenge as it arises. The promise here is profound. By practicing presence, you cultivate clarity, focus, and emotional stability, which in turn strengthens self-discipline and enables consistent progress toward your goals without being overwhelmed by distractions, stress, or self-doubt. A central principle explored in this audiobook book summary is action without attachment to results, a concept drawn directly from Zen philosophy. The chapter explains that while setting goals is essential, obsessing over specific outcomes often leads to frustration, impatience, and burnout. Instead, the Zen approach emphasizes mastery of the process systems and daily routines, trusting that consistent, focused effort naturally produces results over time. By releasing attachment to immediate success or failure, listeners learn to act with full commitment in each moment, while maintaining calm, patience, and persistence, creating an internal state of balance that enhances both discipline and productivity. The promise is that when you align your actions with this mindset, progress becomes sustainable, stress diminishes, and you develop the mental endurance necessary to navigate challenges and setbacks without losing momentum. The audiobook further explores mindfulness as a tool for goal attainment. The chapter teaches that mindfulness, through meditation, intentional breathing, or simply conscious attention to each task, strengthens the prefrontal cortex, improves focus, and reduces impulsive reactions driven by the limbic system. In this audiobook book, listeners are guided to integrate simple mindfulness practices into daily routines, whether at work, during exercise, or while engaging in learning and personal development. The promise here is transformative. Consistent mindfulness enhances willpower, self-discipline, and clarity of thought, allowing you to take deliberate action aligned with your highest priorities rather than being reactive to distractions or emotional impulses. Another key insight highlighted in this audiobook book summary is the Zen principle of simplicity and minimalism. The chapter emphasizes that complexity, overcommitment, and excessive multitasking dilute focus and drain energy. By simplifying your environment, tasks, and objectives, you reduce mental clutter, increase efficiency, and create a framework where disciplined action is easier to sustain. The promise here is that by embracing simplicity, listeners can streamline their routines, prioritize the most meaningful actions, and experience greater productivity, balance, and long-term results, all while cultivating inner calm and peace. The chapter also examines the integration of Zen patience and endurance in the pursuit of long goals. In this audiobook book, listeners are reminded that significant achievements are rarely instantaneous. They require steady, repeated effort, often in the absence of visible results. Zen teaches that embracing this patience, staying committed to the process, and maintaining focus on the present moment allows progress to compound naturally. The book summary highlights that this approach not only strengthens self-discipline, but also develops resilience, mental toughness, and a sense of calm confidence, creating the foundation for extraordinary personal and professional growth. Furthermore, the audiobook emphasizes the concept of non-attachment to failure and fear, a crucial element of Zen practice. The chapter explains that fear, rejection, and setbacks are inevitable components of any meaningful pursuit. By practicing non-attachment, you learn to experience these events without internalizing them as permanent judgments or barriers, instead using them as feedback to adjust systems, habits, and strategies. The promise here is that this mindset fosters emotional resilience, persistence, and rational decision-making, allowing you to continue pursuing ambitious goals with discipline, focus, and confidence even in the face of obstacles. Finally, the audiobook book summary emphasizes that Zen philosophy does not oppose action, rather it enhances it. By combining mindfulness, presence, patience, simplicity, and non-attachment with deliberate daily routines and systems, you create a harmonious balance between effort and awareness, hustle and reflection, planning and acceptance. The chapter promises that by adopting this integrated approach, listeners can achieve radical personal transformation, where self-discipline, productivity, focus, and goal attainment flow naturally from a calm, centered, and intentional mindset, ultimately leading to lasting success, fulfillment, and inner peace. In conclusion, this audiobook book chapter delivers a powerful lesson. Mastering the principles of Zen and goal attainment is not about abandoning ambition, but about cultivating a mindset that supports sustainable, focused, and disciplined action. By integrating presence, mindfulness, non-simplicity, and patience into daily life, listeners can dramatically enhance their ability to achieve goals, build consistent habits, and create lasting personal and professional transformation. The promise of this chapter in this audiobook book is clear. When you combine disciplined systems with Zen awareness, you unlock a pathway to success that is both powerful and profoundly sustainable, transforming not only what you achieve, but who you become. The chapter Meditation for Self-Discipline and Focus explores one of the most powerful yet often overlooked tools for building lasting self-discipline, mental clarity, and sustained productivity, promising listeners that meditation is not just a spiritual practice, but a scientifically validated method for rewiring the brain, improving attention, and strengthening willpower. The big promise of this chapter is transformative. By integrating meditation into daily routines, listeners can enhance their ability to resist distractions, make better decisions, regulate emotions, and cultivate the calm, focused mindset required to consistently pursue ambitious goals across career, finances, relationships, health, and personal growth. This audiobook shows that meditation, when approached intentionally, is a tool for practical self-mastery, creating a foundation for long-term success rather than merely a temporary relaxation technique. The chapter begins by explaining the neuroscience behind meditation and its connection to self-discipline. In this audiobook book, listeners learn that meditation strengthens the prefrontal cortex, the area of the brain responsible for planning, impulse control, decision-making, and sustained attention, while simultaneously reducing activity in the amygdala, the region associated with stress, fear, and reactive emotions. This dual effect allows disciplined action to become more natural as the brain is trained to remain calm, focused, and resilient, even in the face of distractions, discomfort, or stress. The book's summary emphasizes that the promise of this practice is profound. Through consistent meditation, your ability to maintain focus, self-control, and persistence emotional energy on the action itself, freeing resources for sustained effort, creativity, and problem-solving. The book summary emphasizes that this mindset shift produces clarity, calm, and decisive action, allowing listeners to tackle challenges with precision and confidence rather than hesitation or uncertainty. Finally, the audiobook book summary underscores the transformative nature of this principle for all areas of life. By rejecting, try, and committing fully, listeners strengthen self-discipline, accountability, and mental resilience, develop reliable systems and habits, and cultivate the identity of someone who consistently follows through. The promise of this chapter is clear. By changing the language and mindset around action, you create a foundation for radical personal transformation, sustainable success, and mastery over both short-term tasks and long-term goals. In conclusion, this audiobook book chapter delivers a powerful, actionable insight. Trying is an illusion of effort, while full commitment is the true path to self-discipline, focus, and long-term results. By eliminating the word try from your vocabulary, aligning action with identity, and combining commitment with effective systems and daily habits, listeners can achieve extraordinary outcomes across every domain of life, transforming not only what they accomplish, but who they become. The promise of this chapter in this audiobook book is that commitment, not tentative effort, is the key to unlocking lasting success, personal responsibility, and transformative growth. The chapter Winner or Loser, Which One Are You, examines one of the most critical distinctions in personal development, the difference between those who consistently achieve their goals and those who fall short, not because of luck or innate talent, but because of mindset, habits, and self-discipline. The big promise of this chapter is powerful. By understanding the behaviors, thought patterns, and daily actions that separate winners from losers, listeners can consciously adopt the practices, mindset, and routines that lead to extraordinary success, transformation, and personal mastery in career, finances, relationships, health, and overall life fulfillment. This audiobook teaches that winning is not a singular event, but a consistent pattern of choices, habits, and disciplined action that compounds over time, and that anyone can cultivate these traits to shift from being reactive or passive to being proactive, empowered, and results-driven. The chapter begins by illustrating that winners and losers often start from similar circumstances. What differentiates them is not external factors, but internal decision-making and behavior. In this audiobook book, listeners are encouraged to recognize that winners consistently act in alignment with their long-term goals, prioritizing delayed gratification, daily action, and consistent habits over momentary pleasure or comfort. Losers, by contrast, tend to focus on convenience, short-term rewards, and excuses, allowing fear, procrastination, or distraction to dictate their outcomes. The promise here is profound. By identifying these patterns and adopting the winner's mindset, listeners can rewire their behaviors and align their daily actions with success, turning discipline into an automatic, identity-driven practice rather than a temporary effort. A key insight explored in this audiobook book summary is the critical role of self-discipline and mental toughness in determining outcomes. The chapter explains that winners endure discomfort, rejection, and setbacks without surrendering to fear or frustration. They embrace challenges as opportunities for growth, using each obstacle as a stepping stone to build resilience, confidence, and competence. The book's summary emphasizes that losers often retreat in the face of discomfort, allowing temporary setbacks to undermine progress. The promise of this chapter is that by learning to embrace challenge, persist through adversity, and consistently act in alignment with goals, listeners can cultivate the kind of mental fortitude that ensures success is not a matter of chance, but a predictable outcome of disciplined action. The audiobook further explores the impact of identity and self in shaping winner and loser behaviors. The chapter teaches that your actions are directly influenced by how you perceive yourself. Winners see themselves as capable, responsible, and committed, and their choices consistently reflect that identity. Losers, on the other hand, often adopt limiting beliefs, doubt their abilities, and act inconsistently, creating a self-fulfilling cycle of underachievement. This audiobook emphasizes that by consciously cultivating a winner's identity through repetition, daily habits, and intentional choices, listeners can transform their behavior and outcomes. The promise is clear. Change your self-image and your results will follow naturally. Another critical lesson highlighted in this audiobook summary is the importance of systems, routines, and habits in determining whether someone becomes a winner or loser. The chapter explains that winners rely on structured systems, morning routines, productivity rituals, goal-tracking processes, and deliberate practice to create consistent momentum. Losers, in contrast, operate reactively, often relying on motivation alone or responding to external circumstances, which leads to inconsistency and wasted potential. The promise here is that by designing intentional systems and adhering to disciplined routines, listeners can produce compounding results over time, turning small daily actions into life-altering outcomes across career, finances, and personal development. The audiobook summary also emphasizes the role of decision-making and personal responsibility. Winners accept accountability for their results, avoid blaming others or circumstances, and make deliberate choices that align with their long-term vision. Losers often default to excuses, procrastination, and passive behavior. By taking full responsibility and consistently choosing action over avoidance, the chapter promises that listeners can shift their trajectory, developing habits of focus, persistence, and productive action that separate winners from the average or unsuccessful. Finally, the chapter ties all of these principles together, emphasizing that becoming a winner is not about a single heroic effort, but about cultivating consistent identity, disciplined habits, mental toughness, and systems that support long goals. The audiobook teaches that winners emerge through repetition, daily commitment, and embracing discomfort, creating a life where success is inevitable rather than unpredictable. The promise of this chapter in this audiobook is that anyone, regardless of starting point, can adopt the mindset, habits, and routines of a winner, transforming their life, achieving radical results, and living with purpose, confidence, and control. In conclusion, this audiobook chapter delivers a clear, actionable insight. The distinction between winners and losers is grounded in discipline, identity, habits, systems, and responsibility. By consistently applying these principles, listeners can shift from reactive, short-term thinking to proactive, long-term achievement, ensuring that success becomes a natural outcome of their daily choices and deliberate actions, transforming not only what they accomplish, but who they become. In this audiobook summary of the power of discipline, the chapter Fall in Love with the Process examines one of the most essential yet frequently overlooked principles of personal and professional success. The idea that lasting achievement and transformation are less about chasing outcomes and more about embracing the daily actions, habits, and routines that produce them. The big promise of this chapter is compelling. By falling in love with the process, listeners can cultivate sustainable self-discipline, focus, and consistency, reducing reliance on fleeting motivation and external validation, while experiencing growth and fulfillment in career, finances, relationships, health, and personal development. This audiobook teaches that success is not a single event or moment of glory, but a journey built on repetition, persistence, and dedication to the systems that make long-term results inevitable. The chapter begins by emphasizing the psychological trap of outcome-focused thinking. In this audiobook, listeners are encouraged to recognize that many people fixate on goals, benchmarks, or milestones, believing that success will arrive once the transforming stress into structured, purposeful effort. The chapter also emphasizes the link between negative emotions and habit formation. The audiobook explains that unresolved emotions often trigger destructive habits such as procrastination, overreading, or avoidance, which erode discipline and self-confidence. By learning to process and redirect these emotions, listeners can replace harmful patterns with productive behaviors, reinforcing positive routines, mental toughness, and accountability. The book summary highlights that mastering this skill allows negative emotions to serve as signals for adjustment rather than triggers for regression, ensuring long-term personal and professional growth. Finally, the audiobook book summary ties emotional mastery to identity and mindset. The chapter teaches that individuals who consistently harness their negative emotions develop the self-image of someone resilient, disciplined, and proactive. The promise is clear. By transforming fear, anger, and frustration into actionable energy, listeners can cultivate self-confidence, persistence, and sustained success, making discipline not just a practice, but an integral part of their identity. In conclusion, this audiobook book chapter delivers a powerful message. Negative emotions are not enemies to be suppressed, but allies to be understood, managed, and harnessed. By reframing them as feedback, converting their energy into deliberate action, and integrating mindfulness and self-awareness, listeners can transform emotional challenges into drivers of focus, discipline, and long-term achievement, creating a life where even adversity fuels growth, results, and personal mastery. The chapter, The Pareto Principle and Sturgeon's Law, explores a transformative approach to productivity, focus, and decision-making, teaching listeners how to maximize results by concentrating on what truly matters. The big promise of this chapter is that by applying these principles, you can dramatically increase efficiency, reduce wasted effort, and achieve more in career, finances, relationships, and personal growth by focusing on the small percentage of actions that produce the majority of results. This audiobook teaches that understanding the Pareto Principle, often referred to as the 80 Rule, in conjunction with Sturgeon law, which reminds us that much of what we encounter is mediocrity, allows you to identify high-value activities and ignore distractions, ultimately enhancing self-discipline, focus, and long-term success. The chapter begins by introducing the Pareto Principle, which states that roughly 80 of outcomes come from 20 of efforts. In this audiobook book, listeners are encouraged to examine their daily routines, work habits, and priorities to identify the few critical tasks that yield the most significant results. The book summary emphasizes that most people expend energy on low-value tasks or distractions that produce minimal impact, diluting their effectiveness and slowing progress toward meaningful goals. The promise here is profound. By identifying and focusing on the vital 20 of tasks that drive results, listeners can achieve exponential improvement in productivity, efficiency, and personal achievement without increasing effort or time commitment. A key insight explored in this audiobook book summary is the application of Sturgeon's law, which posits that 90 of everything is mediocre. The chapter teaches that in work, content, relationships, and opportunities, the majority of options or actions yield minimal value. By recognizing this reality, listeners can develop the discernment to ignore low-quality inputs, reduce unnecessary effort, and concentrate on the few high-value activities that truly make a difference. This audiobook emphasizes that understanding and applying Sturgeon's law is crucial for avoiding wasted energy and maintaining focus, mental clarity, and consistent progress toward high-impact goals. The chapter also highlights the integration of these two principles into systems and routines. In this audiobook book, listeners are encouraged to structure their days, projects, and decision-making processes around the 80-20 rule, ensuring that critical tasks receive prioritized attention and effort. The book summary stresses that combining the Pareto Principle with awareness of Sturgeon law allows you to avoid over to mediocre tasks, streamline productivity, and make disciplined choices about where to invest time and energy. The promise is clear. By systematically focusing on what matters most and ignoring mediocrity, listeners can create a life of efficiency, high-impact results, and purposeful action. Another important insight emphasized in this audiobook book summary is the impact of these principles on goal attainment and long-term success. By concentrating on the highest value actions and ignoring distractions or low-quality inputs, you not only achieve faster progress, but also build momentum, confidence, and clarity. The chapter teaches that disciplined application of the 80-20 rule and Sturgeon's law strengthens self-discipline, decision-making, and strategic thinking, allowing you to allocate your limited time and energy to the most meaningful and rewarding pursuits. Finally, the audiobook book summary connects these concepts to personal development and identity. By consistently focusing on high-impact tasks, avoiding mediocrity, and applying the 80-20 principle to habits, relationships, and career decisions, listeners can cultivate the identity of someone disciplined, strategic, and results-oriented. The promise of this chapter in this audiobook book is that understanding and implementing the Pareto Principle and Sturgeon's law provides a clear, actionable framework for maximizing productivity, achieving goals, and creating long-term success, transforming not only what you accomplish, but how you approach every decision and action in life. In conclusion, this audiobook book chapter delivers a powerful insight. By identifying the vital few, ignoring the trivial many, and applying strategic focus to high-value activities, you can achieve disproportionate results, reduce wasted effort, and cultivate a disciplined, purpose-driven life where success becomes both predictable and sustainable. The chapter, How to Avoid Burnout, explores one of the most critical aspects of sustaining long-term productivity, focus, and self-discipline: understanding how to manage energy, motivation, and effort to prevent physical, emotional, and mental exhaustion. The big promise of this chapter is profound. Listeners will learn actionable strategies to maintain high levels of productivity, consistency, and personal performance without sacrificing health, happiness, or well-being, ensuring that self-discipline becomes sustainable rather than destructive. This audiobook teaches that burnout is not a sign of weakness, but a predictable outcome of mismanaged energy, overcommitment, and a lack of deliberate recovery strategies, and that by implementing systems to balance effort and rest, anyone can achieve long-term results, personal growth, and inner resilience. The chapter begins by explaining the physiological and psychological mechanisms behind burnout. In this audiobook book, listeners are introduced to the concept that constant stress, unrelenting workloads, and the neglect of mental and physical needs deplete both willpower and motivation, reducing the brain's ability to focus, make decisions, and persist through challenges. The book summary emphasizes that burnout is often the result of pushing too hard, without integrating rest, recovery, and sustainable routines, which leads to diminishing returns despite continued effort. The promise here is clear. By understanding the warning signs and triggers of burnout, listeners can take proactive measures to preserve energy, enhance mental clarity, and maintain discipline and productivity over the long term. A central theme explored in this audiobook book summary is the importance of systematic recovery and balance. The chapter teaches that structured breaks, strategic rest, proper sleep, physical exercise, and mindfulness practices are not optional luxuries. They are critical components of sustained performance. By embedding these restorative practices into daily routines, individuals not only avoid burnout, but also enhance focus, creativity, and decision-making, creating a virtuous cycle of energy, motivation, and consistent action. The audiobook promises that adopting a balanced approach allows listeners to sustain high levels of output without compromising health or long-term goals. Another critical insight emphasized in this audiobook book is prioritization and the 80-20 rule. The chapter explains that burnout often arises from spreading attention across too many low-value tasks, diluting energy and increasing stress. By focusing on the most meaningful actions that produce the highest impact, listeners can reduce unnecessary strain while maximizing results. The book's summary highlights that this approach not only protects against exhaustion, but reinforces discipline, efficiency, and clarity of purpose, ensuring that effort is always aligned with long-term objectives. Finally, the audiobook book summary integrates the concept of mindset and emotional management in preventing burnout. The chapter teaches that cultivating self-awareness, practicing gratitude, and reframing challenges reduces the mental load and emotional fatigue associated with high performance. The promise of this chapter in this audiobook book is that by combining deliberate rest, strategic prioritization, and mental resilience, listeners can maintain sustainable self-discipline, consistent progress, and personal growth, creating a life of high achievement without the destructive consequences of overwork. In conclusion, this audiobook book chapter delivers a critical insight. Avoiding burnout is not about working less, but about working smarter, balancing effort with recovery, and structuring life in a way that supports sustainable performance, self-discipline, and long-term success. As we reach the conclusion of this audiobook book summary of The Power of Discipline, it's clear that the principles within are not just strategies. They are a blueprint for transforming your life at the deepest level. The big promise of this book is simple yet profound. By mastering self-building consistent habits and embracing the process, you can achieve extraordinary results in every area of your life: career, finances, relationships, health, and personal growth. This book teaches that success is not reserved for the naturally talented or endlessly motivated. It is the inevitable outcome of daily action, deliberate practice, and unwavering commitment to your systems and routines. The results are transformative. Listeners who internalize these lessons will develop mental toughness, resilience, and focus, allowing them to persist through discomfort, fear, and setbacks without losing momentum. They will cultivate positive habits, productive routines, and a disciplined mindset that compels consistent progress, turning long-term goals into tangible achievements. By integrating concepts like the Pareto Principle, Zen mindfulness, meditation, and emotional mastery, you gain the tools to make every action deliberate, every decision aligned, and every day productive. Ultimately, discipline becomes less of a struggle and more of an identity, a natural extension of who you are. So, if you found value in this audiobook book summary and want to continue your journey toward radical personal growth, I invite you to like and share this video so others can benefit as well. And don't forget to subscribe to Cliffnote Chronicles for more insightful audiobook summaries, strategies, and tools to help you master your habits, mindset, and results. Remember, transformation is not a single event. It's a journey of small, consistent choices. Commit to the process, embrace discipline, and watch as your life evolves in ways you never imagined.